Hello, everybody. My name is Rena Mikhailis, and with me I have Ben Jones. Now, Ben, this is the very first time that you've ever been on my channel before, but you are a long time commenter though. Like I think that you are the you're probably the only person or about the only person that comments on each and every single last video.
Yeah, it's great to sort of talk to you at last, Rin. I mean, I've known you for a couple of years now, haven't I? And I can say we communicate on Twitter and on YouTube, but we've never actually spoken. So thanks for inviting me onto the show. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I figured it would be nice to just shoots the shits, get to know each other because it's like man, this guy comments on each and every single last video, so I think it would be nice to like get to know you, or it would be nice to just get to know you.
I was drawn to your channel because you put up a lot of commentary, which I find very interesting because you, you seem to be able to understand maybe both sides of an argument because the YouTube community is very split. I mean, you have on the political YouTube side of things most of all, and you have like people like Sargon of Akkad and his followers, and then you have the bread tubers, and you have the alt right, and you have all these different groups. And you often talk about these various people, but you seem to have a it's not non-part. I don't think you're non-partisan. I mean, you describe yourself as a radical centrist, but you seem to have an understanding of all these people's positions and where they fit in, which very few other people do. That's what drew me to your channel.
Oh, well, you see, Christiosity has been my friend for a very long time. Okay, so how did I meet Christiosity? You probably remember this very viral video. Well, viral in a bad way. It's not the good kind of viral, it's the bad kind of viral where she was with Christy Winters and Steve Shives and H Bomber Guy, and the video was called like Reasonable Questions for Anti-SJWs. Remember that one?
Yeah, I do. I remember that's. I watched those channels.
Yeah, and yeah, it's Reasonable Questions for Anti-SJWs. And I saw the video, and out of all of them, okay, many of them seemed like jerks, and it's like, well, I don't want to be really involved with you or associated with you. But Christiosity, out of all of them, seemed like a genuinely nice and genuinely kind person. So I gave her a follow on Twitter and aimed to get to know her. But I mean, then I kind of noticed like a moving of the goalpost, but from the anti-centrist side, because the anti-centrists were saying, why won't you talk to us? Why won't you talk? Why won't you have a conversation? And what Christiosity was trying to talk to many, anti-SJWs and anti-feminist as possible. There was a bit of a moving of the goalposts. So it's like, like Christiosity made a video that went viral, but like in a bad way. The video where she complained about, I probably can't say this word on YouTube. So yeah, because YouTube, it's been a while since I've read this term. I'll assume I can't use this word, but see you next Thursday. And Christiosity made a video telling her friends not to use see you next Thursday. And Bearing and Mitch collaborated and made a response video to that, to whatnot. So it's like it becomes, it goes from why won't you talk and have a conversation to us to, well, being angry that somebody who is, across the political aisle from you has a different political opinion than you.
Yeah, and I remember that, and it's a shame because I think Christiosity means well. I disagree with her on an awful lot, but she seems like a nice person. She's a nurse as well, and so she works in healthcare like I used to, and that sort of gives me a bit of an affinity. But I mean, it's understandable. Like if people don't want swearing, I mean, I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's anything in the rules of YouTube about saying "see you next Tuesday." It'll probably get you. What it'll do is it'll probably get you algorithm because it's a swear word. But I don't think
Well,
it's anything.
Well, in America, see you next Thursday is viewed as sexism. I know it's different between America and England and Australia. Like, I think England and Australia, it's like a normal word. Like, you call your best friend, see you next Thursday. Like, it's like, I know that Bering would use see you next Thursday for his close friends, and
Hmm.
people, like Kevin Logan, would do the same thing. It's just a word, it's no big deal. It's the same thing in New Zealand. But then in America, it's considered misogyny and hate speech. So it's like it's hate speech in America, and YouTube is based in California. So we had to go by what the Californians view as hate speech.
Yeah, it's in England. It is a swear word. It's what you call people usually if you want to be rude. But in Australia, it is actually a friendly term, believe it or not. And Australians generally are quite foul-mouthed people. I've been to Australia, and I remember that quite considerably. So Bering is actually probably one of the more polite Australians from what we can see. But I remember there's always been this sort of on and off war between these different sides, and it sometimes gets quite nasty. It really does. And I mean, even though I have my own opinions, but I've always tried to be good natured in what I do. So I get the same impression from you as well. I try to keep things professional and polite as well as much as we can. We're not at. It may be like an internet war, but it's not all out war yet. I believe there's scope for discussion to try and find out what the truth is.
Yeah, but then internet blood sports happen, and I never liked internet blood sports. You probably seen my videos on it where I spoke out against Andy Worski, because it's like you have like a person getting dogpiled, but live, you would just have like five people versus one, and the person is being antagonized and humiliated and whatnot, instead of a one versus one discourse. And it's kind of like leave the name calling out. So no personal attacks where you give one person a chance to speak, the other person a chance to speak.
Mm. It's actually, I think the internet has become a bit of a burden in that respect because it seems to have affected people's relationships. I mean, people generally, I think, are much ruder online than they are face to face. I mean, trolling can reach the point of like criminal. It can become criminal in nature. And I myself have been targeted by trolls. I mean, really nasty ones. I mean, I'm a pretty robust person. I was a hospital porter. I'm quite resilient, but for some people, it can just be too much. It can be too much for some people, and they're cowards as well. I notice because people who are, I mean, people like Bering and Sargon, I know they can be quite self-righteous and rude. I mean, they make some good points, I must admit, but they go over the top sometimes. But at least they put their faces and names out. The trolls who attacked me guarded their anonymity like the crown jewels. And for 5 years, I had this group called Team Droik, who they were calling me things I wouldn't repeat, even if the rules of YouTube allowed it. But I had to call the police at one point because they were making defamatory statements about me. I'm self-employed. They were trying to contact my clients and things like that and say lies about me. And in the end, I just said to them, "Look, do you want to meet up? So should we sort this out face to face, like gentlemen?" I mean, I have to be careful what I say for legal reasons now, but I just suggested a traditional confrontation of a of a civilized nature. And they says, "Yeah, I'll meet you anytime, mate. Anytime. Just say the words, name, a place." And I said, "Okay, here it is. Here's the time. Let's go." They never showed up. They cannot. you see, it's all bravado, which comes from being online. I think it's the impunity of the keyboard and monitor that gives people this ability to be horrible without the normal social costs that being horrible brings. What do you think about that?
Well, as you know, that I've also been, I also had, I've also been cyber stalked online and impersonated, where there is this person who impersonated me and they were pretending to be me, convincing other people that they were me. And it's like it's too much. It's too much, and you're right, it does reach the point of being criminal because you cannot legally impersonate a person online. And I mean, I wish that something could be done about that, but in a way that keeps freedom of speech.
Oh yeah, I mean the law. I know in my country the law is very specific. It says that threats and defamation are legal. You can't threaten someone with some kind of criminal action. You also can't say things about people which are not true, which are designed to ruin their reputation. And this is what Droik was doing. Both counts they were doing to me. That's why I called the police.
Oh, you mean defamation? Yeah, I think it's no, that it would be libel, wouldn't it be?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's
also
libel.
forms of defamation. Yeah, I don't know what it's like in your country, but these things are illegal across the world, I think.
Yeah, it would be libel in my country. But when it comes to like where I'm from, it's like it's hard to do anything because if somebody harasses you and like you live in one state and they live in another state, it is hard to get anything done. And the police are already like really busy doing with other things. So it's like they just ignore it when people get stalked.
Yeah, and I've heard of people who have actually just given up on the internet. They just I'm not going to bother with the internet anymore. It's just too much trouble. And it's sad because these bullies have effectively chased them off the internet, and it's difficult to know what to do because they have this ability. They can hide behind this fake persona, which doesn't reveal their true identity. And it's awful. It's awful that people behave like that. It really is.
Yeah, more should be done. I think what could be done is something like have you ever heard of I am a VU?
Yes, I think it was a forerunner to Facebook. Was
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
there's a website called I am a VU, and you could have your identity verified, and the way you get your identity verified is like through a credit card. So it would be like nice if there, and what happens is there are two versions of I am a VU. There is the verified version where you verify your identity, and then there's the free version where the free version, which is like you haven't verified your identity, so anybody could use it even if you don't have your identity verified. But it's like if you verify your identity, you're going to have exclusive access to certain rooms. So what happens, I think, could happen to deal with harassment is if you have people who verify their identity, like I am who I say I am, like this is me, like this is me, this isn't me pretending to be somebody else. And the unverified version, and I think that might help.
It's an idea. I mean, it's tricky, see, because the anonymity that the internet gives us can be a very positive thing too, because it allows us to express opinions in a that is those that are not harmful to it allows us to do activity which is not harmful but might be illegal, and it allows us to do so without the repercussions of that. And a good example would be what's become known as whistleblowers. I'm talking, well, there's people like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, for example. But there are many, many other examples of this. And I mean, I myself, I got involved with YouTube because of this. I mean, I am very interested in some subjects. I expect you and I will disagree quite a lot on this, but I got into YouTube because I'm very interested in the paranormal and UFOs and government cover-ups and things like that. And I've been contacted by people within those kinds of realms who they wanted to say something to me. They wanted to talk to me and publish information. And I think it's something that without the internet, they probably couldn't do without getting into trouble.
Well, I mean, well, if you mean, well, it all depends on what you mean by UFO. Like, do you mean aliens or do you mean just an unidentified flying object? Because a UFO could be like a Russian plane, like, because if you're going to go by the actual acronym UFO, then it's just, unidentified flying objects, which could be like a Russian airship or a Chinese airship. But if you mean like UFO by space aliens, then I don't think that they're all that interested in visiting Earth.
Yeah, it's funny enough, the government are now making public statements about this subject, and they're using the term UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, to get away from all the cultural baggage associated with UFO. It's literally true that the term UFO simply means unidentified flying objects, which is anything in the you see flying which you can't identify. So it could be an unusual aircraft, like you said. It could be an unusual bird, even, or kite. Kites are very commonly reported as UFOs. However, there's evidence to suspect that there are objects that some people report that are obviously artificially created. They're obviously not birds, kites, weather balloons, things like that. But they are also not made by humans. They're not one of ours. They ain't from around here, as you say, in your part of the world. And that's always interested me. That's always interesting. Of course, I understand that I could be wrong about some of these things, not all of them, though.
Yeah, usually there is a logical explanation for that. Does it involve aliens? Like, it could be a trick of the lights. Like sometimes, the way a light could play angles could give the impression that there is something there that isn't there. Oh, kind of like what happened with the blue moon incident in Korea, because there is this Japanese singer that's to put it delicately, passed away. Well, it's in a way that's self-inflicted, passed away. And there was a blue moon, and a lot of his fans were like, wow, it's amazing, and wow, and awesome. But it turns out that there's like this blue globe, like this blue globe, and the light kind of like reflected from the globe, and it was just basically a trick of the lights, basically.
Oh yeah, you get that. But could I be very pedantic for a moment, Rin? There's actually, when it comes to explanations, there's no such thing as a logical explanation. There's only a logical method. So if you use logic in the method and you get a conclusion or explanation, but that could be, yes, your logical method can lead you to conclude that something is the blue moon, as you say, or something else. It's just normal. It's a normal identifiable object that you just didn't recognize. On the other hand, your logical method could lead you not to be able to explain the sighting. I mean, you'll never hear ufologists say, "Oh, that was aliens." They tend not to say things like that. They're not like Giorgio Sakalas. If you watch Ancient Aliens, he goes, "Aliens." They're not like that. But they say, "Can't explain that one. Can't explain it." And there's a sort of like wink like that, and as if to say, "Yeah, it may be from other planets." But it is a mystery. It's a mystery. Although, like that person who committed suicide, it's very often, it's getting to the bottom of that I'm very interested in, and that's a kind of community I'm a part of, I suppose. But I sort of overlaps very much with your community, I found, because the skeptics, like the people which includes Sargon and the Mythcon crowd and people like that. It's almost been forgotten that they started off as kind of like atheist promoters. Do you know what I mean? People in terms of scientific skepticism.
Yeah,
We're
the
looking like
skeptics.
yeah. They started off before this sort of anti-SJW versus anti-SJW sort of fight broke out. That's how they kind of began. They people like Richard Dawkins, they were teaming up behind those. Sargon still speaks very highly of Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, there was atheism versus atheism plus, and atheism plus was atheism plus feminism.
Yeah, I remember that there was this big fuss with PZ Myers and a couple of other people, Rebecca Watson and Steve Shives, of course, and they were all on one side, and then there was the slime pit. They called them the slime pit. Do you remember the slime pit? I think that's what they called. Oh right, there was Mike. Do you remember Micah Media?
No.
Oh, right. He was one of the YouTubers that came out against Atheism Plus. Although he hasn't uploaded for years. He's on Twitter. He's active on Twitter, but he hasn't uploaded for years. But I called this the Skeptic Civil War, and it really came to a head a few years ago with what's known as Elevator Gate. Do you know about that?
Nope.
Oh, Rebecca Watson was at a conference. She was an atheist conference in Ireland, and she apparently someone propositioned her. She was in a lift on the way up to her hotel room from the lobby. They were all having drinks in the lobby till God knows how late, and Rebecca got into a lift to go up to her bedroom, and someone got into the lift with her. Someone she's never named, to her credit, and basically tried to seduce her in a rather amateurish way. And she found that a little bit creepy. I suppose she's got a point. If she's in a lift with a guy, it's 4 a.m. It's not the most romantic thing in the world. You know what I mean? And she got like a massive fight broke out as a result of that. A huge fight. Micah was having up PZ Myers, and Richard Dawkins then got into trouble because he posted something, and Rebecca Watson posted something about it, and Richard Dawkins jumped in and attacked her. Things like that. It got really nasty. It completely split the community.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that.
Oh, it's a long story. But Sargon and these other people talk about it sometimes. They've made videos about it. I can send you some links on Twitter if you're interested.
Well, if it's a long time ago, then I don't really want to focus on the past too much.
It's kind of blown over actually now. Yeah, things have kind of moved on from it. It's just an example of how all this situation got started, because originally, I don't know how long you've been looking into this situation, but there was a time when the atheo-skeptic community was completely united. They were like one force. There was big names like Richard Dawkins and Aaron Ra and these people, and they were like one voice. And then they were split over the issue of feminism and things like that.
I mean, I'm not surprised, because atheism, in the end, is just one common denominator.
Yeah, it's just a disbelief in God.
Yeah, it's not really like, like here is the list of things you have in common. It's just one common denominator. Like you could be an atheist, a feminist, a vegan, and whatnot, and somebody could be an atheist, anti-feminist, and they could enjoy meats. All atheism is one common denominator.
It is, yeah. It's interesting how this it must be from a religious point of view. I mean, I'm not religious myself. I wouldn't call myself an atheist. I'm not. I think it's possible that this universe we live in has some kind of consciousness that's convenient to call God. But I don't go to church or anything. And I know it's different in your country, but in my country, most people don't. Most people just don't go to church. I think there was the religious people must be quite amused, because this conflict, like with Richard Dawkins versus, he used to debate priests and things like that. He used to do debates with various religious believers or apologists, C.S. Lewis fans and people like that. And then all along comes this other conflict, which Richard Dawkins, I don't know if he means to, in his own kind of very autistic way, he has planted his flag very firmly on one side of it. And he now tends to focus on political issues. I mean, he's very often seen on stage with Sam Harris or Dr. Jordan Peterson and people like that.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised because in the end, atheism is one common denominator. It is sort of weird, if you really think about it, it's weird to want to unite and bond with somebody just because they only have one thing in common with you.
It's amusing, actually, in a way, and I understand the amusement because religious people, of course, are very divided, and indeed, a lot of evil has been done as a result of religious division. It's one of the leading causes of conflict in the world and always has been. And a lot of the atheists, like Dawkins and many other people, I mean, I read The God Delusion. I've read a lot of these atheist writers, Christopher Hitchens and people like that. They all say things like, well, because of this, if we could just do away with this God instinct in people, we would have a more peaceful world. Possibly they're right, literally, it would be more peaceful, but it certainly wouldn't be completely peaceful. Absolutely not. Atheists find things within atheism to argue about in the same way that religious people find things in religion. And indeed, they can be equally virulent and partisan and dogmatic, I've seen. And it's sometimes you have debates. I mean, one thing I like Christiosity, you mentioned she's willing to get into dialogue, and indeed Kevin Logan and Christy Winters, to their credit, they do the same, but Sargon will as well. But sometimes it gets to the point where these sides won't speak to each other. When people stop speaking to each other, it's essentially you enter a wartime situation, which could result in enormous hardship. I don't know how far it will go, but it's a bad thing, isn't it?
Oh, what's the question?
I was just saying that it could result in terrible hardship if these people stop talking to each other, they stop debating, and they just decide that people who disagree with them are evil, and the only way to deal with them is to focus on how you're going to destroy them.
I don't think that's going to happen, but it could happen. But I don't think that's going to happen. Right now, it's just that many people, it seems like, they traded one religion for another religion. It's kind of like people stopped being Christian and now they are willing to fight for communism.
It's interesting that this seems to be the case. When you take God out of people's lives and you take that away, other things fill that gap. And there are atheists who they exhibit religious-like behavior. And some of this, in some cases, it could be your favorite football team. There's some people who are so football mad, or you call it soccer in America. It's our principal game here in the UK. That they essentially, it becomes a kind of religious experience for them. In communist countries, very often the leader will be worshipped as a god. If you look at the Soviet Union, for example, they used to compose songs about Lenin, which were very like hymns. There's Paul Robeson, an American singer. He used to go to Russia and sing them because he was a communist. And you have Lenin. When Lenin died, they put his body they embalmed his body and put it on public display in this mausoleum, and it's still there today. Putin has decided he's going to keep it there for the time being. And have you seen the parades in North Korea, which is kind of it's the last sort of Stalinist communist country on earth, and they worship the leader almost in a godlike way. And it's amazing. It's like there is actually there's a function of our brain which is actually hardwired into the way we evolved, which tends us towards religious feelings.
Yeah, the erasure of God just caused a vacuum where people just, again, they got rid of one religion and adopted a new religion, and that new religion is communism. And it's kind of a lot like whenever you try to tell the communists that they are wrong, they behave no differently than a religious zealot, you know? Like, it's impossible to tell a communist that they're wrong because it's like a fundamentalist Christian. They would just they'll double down, they'll triple down, they would even argue dishonestly. They would refuse to see any flaw with communism because for them it's like a religious text.
Yeah, I mean, in the Soviet Union, in fact, people who question Marxism Leninism were sometimes diagnosed as mentally ill, and they were put into insane asylums. In Hungary, there was a famous case of a guy who was in one of these for 50 years. Um, and unfortunately, I see that in like the Western left. They have that same fixation on ideology to the point where they do see it in a kind of religious way. It's I think you could tell them if they're not willing to talk to people who disagree with them. I think that is the sign of a true believer in the cult, so to speak. Which means it's in a sense that this means that people like Christiosity and Kevin Logan and Christy Winters, they, to their credit, they are able to look beyond the intellectual black hole, as Stephen Law calls it. Dr. Stephen Law is a philosopher, and look outside that to try and see their own position from the outside. There are those who will not do that. There are people who just block everyone who disagrees with them. There are those who regard people who disagree with them on certain issues as literally holy other, the evil, the Antichrist. I don't know if you've seen the cultural Christians that have been breaking out around the world.
Cultural Christians?
Yeah, have you seen them?
No.
Um, Stefan Molyneux, I think, is one of these people. They'll say things like, I'm not religious, but I understand the value of Christianity in the world and the Christianity in our society. In, like, for example, the United States, which is a very big part of your society. Here in Europe, it's less so. But some people say, well, it's still a good thing to have. So even though they don't believe in it, they still respect it. Molyneux actually did an entire video called "Why I Was Wrong About Christianity." But Computing Forever, Dave Cullen.
Well, I've already seen the Dave Cullen's video taking the God pill.
Yeah, that's a good video because I mean it's very. I find it moving actually that he's speaking out about this because he's been a cultural Christian for quite a long time, but of course his own view now has transformed into a genuine faith. He's not just a cultural Christian; he essentially has had a kind of second coming. Second coming. He's born again. Do you know what I mean? I get the feeling he's kind of born again, and he knew that people would take the Mickey out of him, and he still made the video. And I like the things he says. It's quite good.
Yeah, he probably knew that people would make fun of him, and I did watch the video from beginning to end. And of course, if you went on Twitter at the time, many people were acting superior to him when really they are probably really religious. But it's kind of like if you're religiously a communist, I would argue that that's worse.
Yes, I actually think you could tell a lot about people by how they responded to Dave Cullen's conversion. I mean, for example, this was Kevin Logan and Christy Winters did a video about it where they weren't disparaging him, but they were mocking him. Others, I don't think were really not very tolerant of him, and they're either sort of like it's like the atheists. I mean, most of the atheists on the right, a couple of them were a bit nasty, but I think most of just used it kind of like as another way of attacking him. I think they
Yeah,
saw this as good.
I mostly saw from atheists, but on the left, like Zoe Does Life, like I saw Zoe Does Life making fun of him.
As far as I can see, though, he's carried on with what he's been doing. Dave, he's still doing. He's in Ireland, still focusing on the subjects he's always focused on. And he seems to be one of the nice guys in this business. You know, I can't imagine Dave posting abuse or anything like that on people. He seems to be one of the nice guys.
Well, I mean, I have my disagreements with Dave that I have on my channel. Well, I mean, if people, look, but you know, uh, if you find value in his work, then we could agree to disagree. It all depends on which video you're talking about in the end.
Yeah, I don't know which one particularly. I mean, I don't know all his views on everything. I mean, he makes some good points about certain issues. He covers a wide range of subjects. I'm not sure which ones you mean.
Well, I did a video where he was talking about how do I put it, because I don't want to be bothered by YouTube. Uh, White, or the erasure of white people, the white genocide. I mispronounced it on purpose. And it was actually on his Twitter before he deleted the Twitter, and I made 2 response videos on that. When I'm like, if 2 adults consent to sex, then it's not genocide. It's like if 2 adults give each other, can agree with each other, they both love each other, they both care about each other, and they both want to, do it, and both are happy with it, then it's none of our business. It's only a problem if one person is raped, then that's the problem.
Yeah, it's one of the things that the alt-right are always going on about. This is something they always talk about, and I suppose it's rather like this idea that for some reason we have like a governmental structure that doesn't like white people for some reason. Now, the alt-right doesn't really explain why that is. They don't really explain what it is about white people that they don't like, and why they like other people who are not white. I mean, the alt-right never really explains that. I mean, I go onto BitChute, right, and they're always going on and on about the word begins with J. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but it begins with J, and it's usually shortened to JQ. And they're obsessed with this. They're obsessed with J's, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense, because Jays are quite a diverse breed of people within themselves. They have lots of different ideas. There's, for example, those who go to one kind of synagogue, and there's them that go to another, and they argue with each other. So I don't really see how these people could rule the world. But what you have is, I think there seems to be an agenda towards internationalism and authoritarianism in the world. I don't think it's a racial thing. I think it's to do with authoritarianism. For example, that what they do is, I think if they're moving lots and lots of people from one country into another country, it's probably to confuse and damage the community of that country. It's not Jays. It's not a race of people who are doing it. It's an elite. It's a political elite.
Yeah, I mean, it has been people's long time fantasy to control the world, like, especially like back when I was watching TV. I don't really turn the TV set on anymore, but I remember, like on TV, it's like, or even older songs, everybody wants to rule the world, or yeah, or there was this like TNT movie about Julius Caesar. Like, everybody made an attempt to control the world, and one man came close. I mean, I don't think Julius Caesar came close, but it's a nice way to get people to watch the movie. It's like, about how people are on this quest to control the world, and it's kind of a lot like you have the elites, getting closer to each other, but screwing the people over. It's like, well, I mean, it's the question of what type of world peace do you really want? It's like if a bunch of people of the heads of states are working together, that's nice, but they're working together to screw the people over, then, to have authoritarianism or have the planet ruled by an oligarchy, well, that is still bad in its own right.
Yeah, I mean, I get concerned. People who say they want world peace, I sometimes get a little bit suspicious of, because sometimes, but sometimes this kind of thinking inevitably leads to a position. Well, let's get rid of the people who are causing all the problems. Let's just get rid of them. Let's just remove them from the country, or let's just kill them all. Then we'll have world peace. And it's all this is like this is what communists do an awful lot. There's nothing bad that can be done which supports the revolution. The only good, if their whole moral compass is good equals the revolution, bad equals against the revolution. So if it means killing half the people in the world and leaving the other half, they'll do it because it supports the revolution. And you find that everywhere. You find that kind of ruthless pragmatism all over the place, where achieving the goal is so wonderful that nothing can be dismissed on moral grounds if it can be achieved. And you see this also with, they'll say things like, well, there's you get, it's either white people or it's Jews or it's something else. Let's find some way to keep these people down, get them out of the country or put them into camps or something, and then everything will be wonderful. We will have world peace but the world peace means, yes, because everyone you disagree with is no longer present or no longer has the ability to exert any kind of intellectual power. Then literally, yes, you will have world peace, but you will have achieved world peace. And well, you may not, because as you see atheists, you see how the atheists disagree with each other and the communists fight each other. The Soviet Union and China almost came to a nuclear war as a result of their wars. But they'll still say, yeah, but we might have world peace this way. We'll just get rid of these people. And I think it was actually the non-compete and who first came up with the idea of re-education camps for people like us who might question them. You see, I don't want world peace if it means we have to become evil to achieve it. It won't be there's no peace can be found in being evil. Things always come back and bite you on the bum every time. If you karma, I think, is real. If you do something, it has effects on you. So I think any kind of world peace achieved through extermination, the G word, which you mispronounced, the great substitution, you can't use the R word, it won't be a peace at all. It'll be a horror. It'll be a nightmare.
Yeah, so it's like I am skeptical of world peace. It feels like it's propaganda because American children hear this song. You hear this when you're like 5 or 10 years old. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to I think it's Gulf Stream waters. And it's like, this land was made for you and me. And it's supposed to keep us united. It'd be like, yeah, world peace. When really, there's nothing wrong with conflict because it's like, or like how the Chinese are mistreating the Uyghur Muslims. Should we love them anyway? Like, should we have lovey-dovey attitude towards China, even as they, mistreats the Uyghur Muslims? And not only that, but it's kind of like, I don't even, it's kind of like the left, they want, only the popular votes to count, but people don't want the popular vote to count because what could happen is that politicians would only go to high populated states. They'll just go to Texas, they'll go to California, they'll go to New York and all of the densely populated states, and the needs of farmers would get ignored. and only the biggest cities would be paid attention to. And it's kind of like I would prefer for 50 different states to be seen as 50 different countries with perhaps 50 different needs instead of the popular vote counting. And it's just going to be like California,
Mm.
or, like we just go with how California goes. When really, I mean, there are, splits do happen, kind of like how Finland. I believe that Finland used to be a part of Russia, and I think Finland
Mm.
was also a part of Sweden at one
It
point.
was both, yes.
Yeah, Finland was part of Sweden at one point. Finland was part of Russia at one point, but then Finland got its independence. Same thing like with the Northern Ireland, how Ireland, like in 1917, won its independence from the UK. And it's kind of a lot like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of like if you just want the popular vote counts and that's it, which is going to screw over so many other people. I wouldn't be surprised if people were like, you know what, why don't we just split the United States? And if it splits, it's going to be a lot like it's California and Nevada and New York that are really, really blue. Most of the country is really, really red. And not like that, but it's kind of like if it's seen as its own separate entity, then it's kind of a lot like, I mean, I would think that pirated films would be more normalized. Like instead of um, people cracking down on online piracy, if California were to split off into its own country, then, nothing would probably be done about online piracy.
Yeah, it's as far as China goes. China has one of the worst human rights records in the world. Historically, it always has done. I mean, what's been done to the Uyghurs now is part of a long stream of terrible actions done by China. They've done the same thing in Tibet. There's the Tiananmen Square massacre, where peaceful protesters were basically exterminated by the government in 1989. Um, but they're good for business, you see. So the governments around the world tend to turn a blind eye to China and embrace them as part of the community and say nice things about them because that's where all the industry, that's the heavy industry is now all in the Far East, and it's all moved around the world by big ships. So they shut down coal mines and they shut down factories in places like Britain and the United States, and just import it all because it's cheaper. As far as the popular vote goes, I mean, a lot of people in Britain are saying this because a lot of people in Britain wanted Hillary Clinton to be president, and when she won the popular vote, they could say, why can't they change it so the popular vote is what decides it? But as you just said, the United States is not a singular state; it's a federation, which means, I mean, if you look at the map, I've looked at the map and I can see states of different sizes. And you mentioned Texas and California and these states with big cities in. And there's little states like Rhode Island, which is tiny, and Alaska is very big, but it has a small population. Those people would never ever have any say on who their president is. They would never get a say in it. So that's an important point. And the thing is, Calexit, they call it, don't they? It's where this idea that California could be independent. If that happens, I'm not sure. I don't know enough about the United States to say. I mean, I supported the Leave vote here in Britain, and very much so, that Britain leaving the European Union, and we have done, and I'm pleased about that. But as far as California goes, I don't know. I know a lot of the conservatives will say, "Oh yeah, get rid of California. They're a bunch of lefties anyway. We can go our own way." If that carries on, though, you may end up like with some kind of division within the US. I don't know how bad it could get. Could it be a second civil war? I mean, the first civil war was, like 1 million people died in the first civil war, and it was awful. Practically a G word. I would hate to see that happen again because there'd be enormous suffering if that happens, and of course it would destroy the country. I mean, the country barely survived the first civil war, so.
Yeah, I wouldn't I wouldn't be surprised if there would be a civil war, but I do think, I mean, There are many people in California that want to say Calexis, but not everybody, because there are people in California that love that they have like, I think they have like 55 electoral votes. So
Mm.
it's kind of like they do have a lot of power, and it's kind of a lot like, well, they even admitted, like, I think on the LA Times, that they helped push America further left, and it's kind of like, hey, we don't really want Calexa because we push the rest of America to the left. And it's kind of like they were like, we were still connected, and it's like we don't really want this. When really, I feel like the Californians, like Hollywood, California, the celebrities calling, everybody in between California and New York a flyover states. It's like if you don't live in California or New York, you're just a flyover state. And how they look down on the rest of the United States. I think that more and more people are really tired of the Hollywood types, because all they do is like look down on everybody in the flyover states.
Yeah, I mean, I can see there are enormous cultural and political differences in your country, because the United States is huge. I mean, it's an enormous country, and people vary an awful lot. And I do get the feeling that, like, on the West Coast, you have like the movie industry and things like that. On the East Coast, you have like the literature and academia. You have the big Ivy League universities. You have the publishing houses in New York. You have the theaters in New York, and it's rather like, I suppose it's similar to the division in England between the North London set, as we call it, which is rather like California. They're left wing, they're middle class, they're educated, and for example, the North Country, which is kind of like our Rust Belt. We have a lot of industry, we have a lot of welfare deserts, we have factories that are gone, coal mines that are gone, shipyards that are gone, ports that have been shut, fishing, the fishing industry's been decimated, things like that. And there's not a lot, I suppose there's not a lot of you can actually say are in common in terms of interests within these two different groups. I live in Oxford, which is like this is one of the academic hubs of the entire world. I'm not an academic person. I'm working class, I suppose. So within the country, what is there to hold us together? There has to be something to hold the nation together, or it'll split apart. I think in Britain we do have a sense of that. We do have a sense of nationhood. In the United States, it's quite unusual because you have a country that is essentially founded on a philosophy. It's a much more recent creation than ours. I mean, it's not 1776 or 1776, as Alex Jones would say. Which, in a sense, you have like your Bill of Rights, you have your Constitution, which are essentially philosophical ideals, and that to be an American, it's not so much about your ancestry or your background; it's about your relationship with that philosophy. I get that. That's why I get the feeling, which makes America very unusual as a country.
Yeah, but now the left is just too elitist, too snooty, where they have their head shoved far up their ass. They're better, more superior to everybody else. They want only the popular vote that counts, which would screw over the farmers, and it could that in itself would lead it to a civil war, because if you live in a flyover state, you're not going to want that. And of course, the left wants to lower the voting age to like 16, because it's like younger people tend to vote left. So they want to exploit younger people for, those blue votes. I think it's just going to backfire, because country splitting, I mean, again, Finland gained its independence from Russia and Sweden. Northern Ireland got its independence from the UK. I think Scotland tried to get its independence from the UK.
Good, yeah. They have been.
It actually happened?
Not yet, but there's been many efforts over the centuries for Scotland to become independent. There's a widespread nationalist movement in Scotland, an independence movement. Ironically, though, the modern independence movement is basically focused on getting Scotland out of the UK into the EU. So I have to ask myself, how is that independent? It's ironic, but it is important, I think, that to avoid civil war is that people are kept within the dialogue. I think this counts for what we talked about with the internet earlier on, with the SJWs and the anti-SJWs, and the idea that you can, if however opposed you might be, you can at least have some kind of dialogue to try and sort things out. In politics, the same is necessary, because if you remove people from that dialogue and try to get them out, it's a very dangerous situation. We had, in 2016, after the Brexit vote, which went towards independence, it was 52 versus 48 in terms of percent, in terms of the support for independence. A lot of the Remainers, that's the people who voted against independence, were saying we will forget it. We'll have another referendum to have what we want, and this time we will allow younger people to vote. We'll allow, like I say, we'll allow 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds to vote instead of 18. You know, normally you can only vote when you're 18 here, for the same reason that you said. You know, because they tend to vote for the left. They tend to vote. They'll support the Remain cause because it's a left-wing cause, and they'll say things like, we'll just keep doing this. We'll keep gerrymandering the whole situation and engineering all the conditions until we get what we want. But that's not democracy. That's not freedom. Democracy, if democracy is to work, then people who lose votes have to accept that they've lost votes. And if they don't, then the system will break down, and we will end up with some kind of conflict which could become violent. Because if you take the ability to speak away from people, that's when they start shooting.
Exactly. Like, you know, it's kind of like the left looks down on the rights. It's not really a secret. You know, it's pretty much they very openly look down on their rights, and they openly do not want right-wing voices to be heard, which could, I mean, if they get what they want, and it's only the popular vote that counts, I believe that a civil war really would occur, because now the rights would lose each and every single last election. So
yeah, they definitely do this. They want to basically, like I say, to engineer the situation where they have a kind of super majority, which involves the popular vote. It involves more people from Mexico being granted citizenship and voting rights and things like that. It's a dirty trick. It's what's the word? It's amoral. It's almost like, okay, we don't want everyone to, we don't want democracy in the sense that we have some kind of system for making it fair. We're going to use the democratic process to our own advantage. We're going to create a kind of little dictatorship out of the democratic process. It's a really dangerous situation. I mean, I'm concerned about the way things are going in the world, in your country and mine. If, for example, there's a rejoin alliance or something in Britain before the next general election, there could be some attempt to get Britain back into the EU. There could be, who knows what they'll do. But I know it's that the elite are very keen on Britain staying in the EU, or they were. Now they're going to try and get us back into the EU. The people like me who voted Leave are going to feel like we're having our independence taken away from us, undone. And we're going to think, well, what can we do? Can we vote? Is there a way out of this within the civilized political system, within the law and within due process? Because if there's not, what are we going to do? We can then either accept it, or we can go outside the political process, which is, I think, the definition of war. It's like von Clausewitz, you know, it's a continuation of politics by other means. But it has a political goal, but it's, in a way, it's extra political. War is anti-political. So I think the people who advocate for this sort of thing are playing with fire. A lot of them don't realize how hazardous this is, the situation that they're advocating. They kind of get this idea that when we take power, it'll be all right, because everyone will just go along with it. It's a nightmare. I don't know if these people are NPCs, as they call them, or what. I don't know if there is such a thing as NPCs.
Yeah, I mean, it is a form of narcissism. Like, oh, like, it's like when we're in power, you're just going to shut up and follow along. When
Mm.
really, again, Finland got its independence from Russia. Um, you know, um, Ireland got its independence from the UK. California getting its independence, plus it's actually happening, or, the state splitting up. It's not flat out, it's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that the Calexit thing. I should look up more into it because I know that I think Tree of Logic has done some videos about that. I haven't watched them yet, but she said something about that. I remember, and it's unusual in history for this sort of thing to happen peacefully. Countries that broke, like with Yugoslavia, when Yugoslavia was a former nation that broke apart, and when it did so, it involved some of the most terrible bloodshed the continent has ever seen. The period between around about 1990 and 2000 was horrible. I don't know how many people died, but there was about various wars were breaking out between the various constituent nations of Yugoslavia, and still to this day, there's a lot of animosity. People are different. There are Serbs and Croats, there are Muslims, and there are Catholics and Orthodox believers and people like that. I mean, this is the sort of thing that's sort of kind of started the First World War, the war to end all wars, as they called it, which didn't.
Yeah, oh yeah, the First World War, the war to end all wars, but who knows, there might be a World War III, maybe.
Hopefully not, but I think this is why voices of calm are so necessary in this world. I think because it can prevent that. I think people who can be rational are very important right now. People who can remain calm and rational.
Yeah, if there's any, lights at the end of the tunnel, it's that they left our infighting more. Because it's like something that I've noticed. It's like first they came for the Nazis, and I didn't care because I'm not a Nazi. Then they came after the conspiracy theorists, and I didn't care because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Then they came from the conservatives, and oh no, it's getting hotter. Like, whoo, it's getting hot in here. Then they came for the moderates, and well, what I noticed about the moderates is that many moderates started creating block lists. Like each and every single moderate I've spoken to just created a block list. Now they're infighting, which is really predictable because they're running out of enemies. They're running out of enemies to fight, but the anger is still there, so they're fighting each other more. And I mean, it's like, you're not left enough, you're not left enough, or you're bad for the left. Hooray! They're just still fighting amongst themselves because they ran out of people to fight, but the anger is still there. It's like, okay, Dalt Slime called another person to the left. I know that Temple and Blair White's censored this word. Okay, it's when an adult, okay, men, typically men attracted to little boys, because I know that Temple blurred the word out or censored the word. Blair White's also censored the words. So like when an adult is attracted to a person who's like, 5 years old, an Amos Yee, that.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and Dog Slime said that's about a person with a weird name. It's like this really weird name that I cannot pronounce to save my life. And then it's kind of like where there's that scandal, and there's more and more leftist infighting, leftist drama, and it almost seems like there are some people that look for a fight for any alt-writer that would have them to create some type of left-wing unity, because, if there's a common enemy, I noticed that there is more unity behind, working together against the common enemy, but it's not really working all that much because it's kind of like they did everything that they could to keep the enemy, off, Twitter and YouTube and whatnot. So trying to unite over a common enemy is really all that effective. It's only really going to be really effective if they're going to have a real voice on a platform. Now we get rid of them and we are trying to use them so that everybody would have something in common to pick at.
It's rather like what we were saying earlier about world peace, in a sense that those who go for world peace will end up doing exactly what the left are doing right now. If they ever achieve their goals, it'll get 10 times worse. And what's more, I think there's a psychological source for this, Rin, because there are certain people I think enjoy conflict for its own sake. It could be something to do with their own childhoods and their own backgrounds. Maybe they felt their parents didn't listen to them. Maybe they felt that they didn't get this, they felt lonely when they were children. Their parents didn't give them enough care and attention. It may be something like that. But there are certain people. I mean, I know that I think Warski and the Internet Blood Sports is almost a kind of parody of that. But it gets very serious within leftist circles. For example, you have like the T's. I can't say the word, but the T's and the supporters of the T's, the intersectionals, the intersectional feminists versus the TERFs, the T exclusionary radical feminists, and that's got incredibly bitter. I'm astonished. It's got worse than the like skeptic versus feminist civil war of a few years ago, and it's I think it may be what they call the narcissism of small differences, because.
Yeah, I agree with you. There will be a narcissism. I think I've read an article about that actually. I actually did read an article like years back, like 3 or 4 years ago, about the narcissism of small differences.
Yeah, I mean, we see, for example, J.K. Rowling, who's the author of Harry Potter. She's always been very much a figure of the left. She's always been very keen on multiculturalism and feminism. She's now being cancelled by the left for her, what they perceive as her anti-T positions. And there's many others, as Graham Linehan, who a comedian who wrote Father Ted, brilliant comedy series. He's gone the same way. The left is cancelling itself now. It's obviously anyone like myself outside the left is beyond the pale anyway. But even within the pale, they are splitting. The pale is now splitting into warring factions. There's no reason to think that this process won't continue if they ever gain the power that they want, which is another reason for not allowing these or trying to stop these people getting the hegemony that they seek. So by subverting the intellectual process and the political process, I just hope we can do it.
Well, they don't see just how much that they have in common with the far right. It's kind of like they like to, act like they're totally different from the far right. People like Mussolini, when really they are just really bad at themselves. And what I think it is, it's like I've read about this on a book called Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. And they have this sentence where it says, darkness begets darkness. And what it means that, it's kind of a lot like when you work somebody up and they get angry. Well, anger management exists for a reason. Once you get angry, to a certain point, it's hard to control your anger without therapy. What I mean by that is like there are people like Francesca Ramsey that tries to keep people riled up. If you ever seen Francesca Ramsey with MTV Decoded or feminist articles about tone policing, like, don't you tone police me? Like, I might be yelling and screaming at your face and I could still be right and whatnot. And, it's kind of like you should listen even if a person is yelling and screaming at you. And I think that there's a book out there called Why Feminists Are Angry, and where anger is glamorized. It's like where they try to glamorize being angry when really when you get angry, there's the reason why anger management exists is because anger could reach the point where it's beyond your control, and you would need therapy and to learn how, or get a self-help book. But it's kind of a lot like, it's kind of like, not that, but people are seen as heroic, like people are part of Antifa, and you know that there are going to be journalists who writes of Antifa in a very beautiful poetic way, like Antifa was around during World War II Germany, and they are our great heroes and our great saviors and whatnot.
Yeah, there are people on the far left and the far right who I detect have serious psychological problems, and it does seem to be almost like it does seem to be making an overwhelming feeling of anger, of bitterness, and I mean, I myself get angry about things that happen to me in my life, but I try to keep it under control. I do try to maintain control of my emotions. I do, and it's important to do that because I think that I think politics can be a projection of our internal landscape, very much indeed. And you see it with Antifa, you see it with Richard Spencer screaming at the top of his voice and losing his cool. I mean, he's a very calm, kind of very collected, rather sophisticated person, but he was recorded just screeching at the top of his voice, like the most virulent radical feminist you've ever heard. And there's a lot of people end up like in they end up with psychological problems. I mean, there's no secret that Millennial Woes has really had a major breakdown. He's had a huge breakdown in psychologically, and he's made videos about it, and it doesn't surprise me actually. I see the same thing like in the conspiracy theory world. People get into these radical ideas, and it's sometimes it's almost like they're drawn into it because they're damaged people. Their own damage. It's a way of trying to deal with their own damage. I think perhaps if they were less damaged, they'd probably become liberal Democrats or something, or they join the Democratic Party and become like a Hillary supporter. I don't know, but it's sad. It's sad to see that. I think it says an awful lot about the human condition, the human experience.
Yeah, you're right. So is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Well, we've been talking for over an hour, and I'm sure I can't think of anything off the top of my head now, Ren. But I'm sure we could probably I'd probably think of something. But if you want to link.
Well, if you don't have anything more to say and I don't have anything more to say, then maybe we should end it here. And it was great having you on. It was great talking to you, and everybody check out Ben Jones. I left his Twitter account and his YouTube channels in the description below. Bye everybody.
Bye bye everyone. Thanks for watching.